The first phone call I ever made in a real crisis was to my mother. The last phone call she ever needed to make in hers was to me. That's not a coincidence. That's a bond built over 54 years. One ordinary act of love at a time. Margaret Doyle was not a complicated woman. She didn't need to be Dot. She was the kind of mother who showed up to every single one of my Little League games with a folding chair she'd hauled there herself, who packed my lunch until I was old enough to be embarrassed by it, and who sat up waiting every time I came home late, not to punish me, but because she simply couldn't sleep until she knew I was safe. That was her. That was always her. Love wasn't something Margaret Doyle talked about. It was something she did daily, quietly, without keeping score. When my father passed 11 years ago, a Thursday morning in March, the kind of day that permanently changes the color of a month, she didn't fall apart. She grieved the way she did everything else. With her chin up, Dot, she sold one of the cars to cover the funeral costs without telling me until it was already done. Dot kept the house running on a fixed income and still managed a hot meal on the table every Sunday for anyone who showed up. She never once called me to say she was struggling. Not once in 11 years. So understand, when Margaret Doyle called me at 7:38 on a Wednesday morning and said her chest felt funny, I didn't hesitate. I didn't calculate. I didn't weigh my options. 50-4 years of that woman's love doesn't produce a man who hesitates. It produces a man who moves immediately, without question, without condition. What it doesn't prepare you for is the person standing between you and the door. My name is Gerald Doyle. I'm 54 years old. I coach youth soccer on the weekends, and I've been the kind of husband who thought keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. I was wrong. Took me a while, but I got there. It was Wednesday, February the 11th, 7:38 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing in the kitchen watching the coffee drip, slow, like even it didn't want the day to start, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I picked up on the second ring. Wesley, I mean Gerald. Her voice was thin, not her usual voice. Margaret Doyle didn't do thin. This was a woman who'd survived a husband's passing, a recession, and a knee replacement without asking anyone for a single thing. Mom, you okay? I didn't want to bother you. There it is. 83 years old and still apologizing for existing. What's going on? I said, already moving toward the hallway. Just tight. And my left arm keeps going numb. Mom! I'm coming. I'm sure it's nothing. Mom, stop. I'm coming. I hung up and stood there for exactly 3 seconds. My truck, a 2018 GMC Sierra, was sitting at Halloran's garage on Birchwood Street. Alternator, they'd called yesterday. Wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Okay. Think, Gerald. Think. Diane's car. A silver Toyota Highlander sitting fat and unbothered in the driveway. Full tank. She'd filled it herself on Monday. Diane was upstairs. I could hear the shower running, that long, luxurious 30-minute shower she took every morning like she was prepping for a photo shoot. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Diane, the shower kept running. Diane? The water shut off. A long pause. What? Not, what's wrong? Just what? Like I'd better have a good reason. I need to borrow your car. My mom's having chest pains. I need to get her to Riverside Memorial. Silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone has already decided and is just working out how to say it. She appeared at the top of the stairs 30 seconds later. Towel around her hair, robe tied at the waist. Face completely unreadable. Gerald. I can't today. Diane, my mom's chest is tight. Her arms going numb. I heard you. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Call an ambulance. She doesn't like ambulances. You know that since Dad, then call someone else. She was already turning back toward the bedroom. I have that lunch with Carol and the girls today, and I've still got a full day of work. I'm not spending it in a hospital waiting room. I stood completely still. Did she just, Diane? My voice came out quieter than I expected. Her left arm is going numb. She stopped. turned halfway, looked at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Not concern, not guilt, inconvenience. She's your mother, Gerald. Not mine. A pause. Figure it out. She went back into the bedroom. The door didn't slam. That almost made it worse. A slam would have meant emotion. She just closed it gently, like she'd told me we were out of milk, like an 83-year-old woman's arm. Going numb was a minor scheduling conflict she didn't have room for. I stood there a moment. Just a moment. Then I pulled out my phone. Harold Beckett lived 4 houses down on the same block. A retired union pipe fitter, 72 years old, drove a well-kept older Buick that had seen better days but never missed a morning. Just like its owner. The kind of man who still shook your hand properly. He and my mother had known each other over 20 years. He'd sat front row at my father's funeral. He picked up on the first ring. Gerald, what's up, brother? Harold, I need a favor. Mom's having chest pains. My truck's in the shop. Diane's car isn't available. Can you take us to Riverside Memorial? Not even a pause? Give me 4 minutes. I'll pull up front. That's it. No negotiation. No conditions. No lunch plans to check. I called Mom back immediately. I'm coming, Mom. Harold's driving. You don't need to do anything. Just unlock the door and sit down. You hear me? Sit down. I really don't want to make a fuss. Sit down, Mom. A small sound. Almost a laugh. Okay, baby. Harold pulled up in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I counted. The drive to Riverside Memorial on Sycamore Street took 11 minutes. Mom sat in the back beside me, her small hand wrapped in both of mine, wearing her good gray coat like she was going somewhere important. Because she kept apologizing the whole way there. I'm sorry to drag you out, Harold. It's nothing. I was just watching the news anyway. Was it any good? Nothing ever is? She laughed. Actually laughed. And I looked out the window at the gray Ohio morning and felt 2 things at once. Gratitude for Harold and something else. Something cold and quiet for Diane. I didn't examine it yet. I just let it sit. Riverside Memorial was busy for a Wednesday. We checked in at 8:19. A nurse named Sandra, broad shoulders, no nonsense. The kind of woman who'd seen everything twice, had Mom in a room. Within 15 minutes, the doctor on call was a tall man named Dr. Whitfield. Calm voice, deliberate hands. He didn't rush. Mrs. Doyle, I want to run an EKG and check your enzyme levels. The symptoms you're describing, we don't ignore those at your age. Mom looked at me. Her eyes were asking if she should be scared. Do whatever he says, Mom, I told her. She nodded. Then she reached up and touched my face. You came? She said simply, like she hadn't been completely sure I would. That nearly broke me. Mom, I'll always come. She patted my cheek twice, lay back on the pillow, and closed her eyes. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 35 minutes. Plastic chair, bad lighting, a muted TV in the corner playing a game show. I drank the worst coffee of my life from a machine by the elevator and didn't taste a single sip. Diane didn't text once. Not even, is she okay? At 10:58, Dr. Whitfield came to find me. Measured face. Serious, not alarmed. Mr. Doyle, your mother had what we call a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but her body was warning her. We want to keep her for observation, run more tests, adjust her medications. She's stable. She's stable. She's also asking if there's a television in her room. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's her. Can I see her? Give us 20 minutes to get her settled. I sat back down, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. Figure it out, Diane had said. Figure it out. While she went to lunch with Carol and the girls. While her mother-in-law's heart sent out distress signals, I figured it out. I called Harold, who'd waited in the parking lot the entire time like the man he was. She's stable, I told him. Thank God, he said. And he meant it. Harold, thank you. His voice was firm, gentle. That's what people do. I let that sentence sit in the air a moment. Some people. I stayed with Mom until 4 that afternoon. We watched half a game show, sound on this time, And she beat me twice at a word game she made up on the spot involving hospital equipment and state capitals. Sharper than me on her worst day. Always had been. At 3:42, just before I left, she took my hand again. Her voice had shifted. The thin morning voice was gone. This was her other voice, the one she used when she meant something. Gerald. Diane didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had that lunch. Just my name. That's all she needed. I looked at her. 83 years old, gray coat folded over the chair. Eyes as clear as they'd ever been. She went to lunch, I said quietly. With her friends? The words landed in that hospital room like something dropped from a great height. Mom didn't gasp. Didn't raise her voice. Didn't say a single word about Diane. She just nodded slowly and looked toward the window. The afternoon light hit the skyline just right, gold and quiet and tired. She didn't say anything else. But I saw something move across her face. Something that looked a lot like a decision. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 and walked out of Riverside Memorial into the cold Ohio air. Harold came back to pick me up. We drove home in comfortable silence, past bare trees along Fenwick Avenue like the world was shedding something it no longer needed, and somewhere in that quiet, I realized I wasn't angry at Diane. I was done. Some people spend their whole lives making withdrawals from relationships they never bothered to deposit into. Diane had overdrawn for years. Thursday, February the 12th, 6:52 in the morning. I woke up before the alarm. That's how you know something's sitting on your chest that sleep couldn't move. I lay there on my side of the bed, the left side, always the left, 11 years. And I still slept like I was leaving room for someone who wanted to be there. Diane was still asleep, hair spread across the pillow, breathing slow and even, completely unbothered. The woman could sleep through a verdict. I got up quietly, made coffee, yes, with the loud machine, and no, I didn't feel bad about it. Not even slightly. She chose lunch over my mother's arm going numb. She could survive the coffee grinder. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the morning come through the window over the sink. My phone was face down. No messages from Riverside. No news was good news. I thought about Mom in that hospital bed, small against the pillow, her good coat folded over the chair like she'd dressed up for the occasion of being sick. About the way she touched my face and said, "You came." 2 words. 54 years of love compressed into 2 words. They nearly broke me all over again. She always came for me. Every single time, without question, without condition. The very least I could do was come for her. I was on my second cup when I heard Diane on the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her robe, glanced at me, then the coffee machine, then back at me. "You made coffee." "Every morning for 11 years, I said. "Still surprising." She poured a cup, leaned against the counter. A beat of silence. The specific kind married people know, waiting for someone to bring something up. She finally did. "How's Margaret?" "Margaret." Not your mom, not Mom. Like she was a coworker. An acquaintance from some function Diane had forgotten she'd attended. "Stable," I said. "Mild cardiac event. They're keeping her another day." She repeated it slowly, like tasting the words. Another silence. "How was lunch?" I asked. She blinked. "Just once." But I caught it. "It was fine," she said carefully. "Gerald, I want you to know yesterday was really complicated for me." Complicated. I let the words sit between us. "Your mother-in-law's heart was sending distress signals and you were at a restaurant?" "But sure, complicated." "Gerald, Diane," I said, the same way my mother said my name the night before. Just the word. Flat and final. She stopped. "I'm not doing this right now," I said. I stood, rinsed my mug. "I heard you the first time yesterday at the bottom of the stairs." I picked up my phone, jacket, keys, my spare set, since my truck was still at Halloran's, and walked to the door. "Where are you going?" "To see my mother." I didn't look back. Harold drove me again. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer opinions. Just drove, one hand on the wheel, an old country station playing low. There's a specific kind of friendship that doesn't need words to function. Harold and I had that. Always had. We parked at Riverside at 8:35. "I'll be here," he said. "Harold, you don't have to." He looked at me over his glasses. "I'll be here. Some people show up, make a note of who they are. Right, it's somewhere permanent. Mom was sitting up when I got to her room, color back in her face, thin voice completely gone. She'd refused the hospital gown after the first night, which I respected deeply, and had her reading glasses on, a crossword book open in her lap. "7 letters, she said the second I walked in. "The tray." I stopped in the doorway and stared at her. She looked up over her glasses with the straightest face I'd ever seen on a human being. "For the crossword, Gerald." I laughed so hard the nurse looked in from the hallway. "Perfect," I said, dropping into the chair beside her bed. "Perfect." She counted the boxes, wrote it in, nodded with deep satisfaction. "You always were the smart one." "I'm your only child, Mom. Still the smart one." We sat like that a while. Easy quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists between people who've loved each other long enough to not need to fill every silence. She finished 2 more clues. I drank the terrible hospital coffee and didn't complain, because sitting in that room with her, even in a hard plastic chair, drinking something that tasted like regret, was exactly where I wanted to be. Where I would always want to be. Then she closed the book, set it on the bedside table, folded her hands in her lap. "Here we go. I want to call Frank this morning," she said. Frank Sorensen. Attorney at law, 30 years in practice in the county. He'd handled my father's estate. Drawn up Mom's will 6 years ago. Sharp man, precise. The kind of lawyer who listened more than he talked, which in my experience was rarer than it should be. I kept my voice careful. "Okay, I've been thinking," she said, "since last night." "Mom, you don't have to..." Gerald Michael Doyle. Full name. All 3. I hadn't heard all 3 since I was 17 and came home 40 minutes past curfew. "Do not finish that sentence." I closed my mouth. She looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. The light through the window was softer this morning. It made her look younger somehow. Or maybe it just made her look exactly like herself. Exactly like the woman who packed my lunch and sat up waiting and sold a car without telling me and made Sunday dinners for 34 years on Larkspur Lane, my mother. The most constant thing in my life. "I've worked my whole life," she said quietly. "Your father and I, we scrimped and saved and went without so that what we built would mean something. So it would go somewhere that mattered." A pause. "To people who showed up, I didn't say a word." "Diane didn't show up, Gerald. I know. Not just yesterday. She picked up her crossword book, not to work on it, just to hold something. Not at your father's funeral reception. Not when I had the knee surgery and needed rides to physical therapy. Not at Christmas 2 years ago, when I had that flu and you had to leave dinner to check on me." She looked up. "And not yesterday, when my heart was failing." She went to lunch. Every example landed like a stone in still water, dropping slow, sinking deep, because she was right. She had always been right, and I had been making excuses for years. "I'm not angry," she said. And the remarkable thing was, she wasn't. Her voice was completely calm, steady as a hand on a Bible. "I'm just accurate." She reached for the small folded piece of paper tucked inside her glasses case, a phone number written in her own neat, deliberate hand. Frank Sorensen. Direct line. She'd come prepared. My mother didn't make impulsive decisions. This had been building longer than one hospital stay. "Do you want me to step out?" I asked. She considered it a moment. "No, stay." Stay. One word. Everything in me went still and grateful. She dialed at 9:14 a.m. He picked up on the second ring. "Frank Sorensen." "Frank, it's Margaret Doyle. I hope I'm not catching you early, Mrs. Doyle." His voice warmed immediately. "Never too early for you. How are you?" "I'm in the hospital, actually. Riverside Memorial." A brief pause. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Serious?" Serious enough to make me think clearly, she said. And even then, even calling her lower from a hospital bed the morning after a cardiac event, there was dignity in her voice. Grace that can't be performed. The kind built over 83 years of doing the right thing even when it costs something. Frank, I need to update my documents. The will specifically. Silence on his end. Professional silence. Absorbing, not stalling. Of course. Do you want me to come to you? Please, today if possible. I have some very specific changes in mind. I can be there by 2. Perfect. She glanced at me. My son will be here. Very good, Mrs. Doyle. I'll see you at 2. She hung up, set the phone down, picked her crossword back up. Just like that. Like she hadn't just changed everything. Like she hadn't just loved me in the most powerful, permanent way a mother could. I sat there a moment, throat tight, eyes steady, barely. Mom, my voice came out quieter than I intended. You don't have to do this for me. She didn't look up from the crossword. I'm not doing it for you, Gerald. She filled in a letter. Calm, deliberate. I'm doing it because I've earned the right to decide where my life's work goes. And I've decided. She looked up over her glasses. Any other questions? I had approximately 40. I asked 0. No, ma'am. Good. She went back to the puzzle. Now go find me something edible from that cafeteria. Whatever they've been bringing me for breakfast tastes like a decision someone regretted. And for just a second I looked at her. This small, sharp, magnificent woman in her own nightgown. In an Ohio hospital room filling in crossword answers like the world owed her nothing and she owed it everything. And I thought, I have spent 54 years trying to be worthy of her. I hope I'm getting there. Frank Sorensen arrived at 1:56 p.m. Charcoal suit, leather briefcase, silver haircut close. He shook my hand firmly, nodded like a man who understood the weight of rooms, and sat across from my mother with a yellow legal pad and a pen that probably cost more than my alternator. I sat in the corner, quiet, a witness. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. I won't put every word here. Some things deserve their privacy. But I'll tell you this, by the time Frank Sorensen clicked his pen closed and tucked the legal pad back into his briefcase, the document Diane Doyle had been silently counting on for 11 years of marriage had been fundamentally, irrevocably and legally rewritten. The house on Larkspur Lane. Paid off outright in 2010, Gerald. The investment accounts my father had. Spent 30 years building. Gerald. The jewelry. The furniture. The 1968 Pontiac GTO that still ran perfectly and lived under a cover in her garage. The car my father spent 4 years restoring with his own hands. The car that still smelled like him on warm days when you opened the garage door. Gerald. And $15,000. Earmarked specifically for the Hartwell County Animal Shelter. Because Margaret Doyle had volunteered there every third Saturday for 11 years. Because that's the kind of woman she was. Diane's name appeared exactly 0 times. Not my problem, someone had once said. Turns out, correct. When Sorensen stood to leave, he shook my hand again at the door. Your mother, he said quietly, glancing back at her across the room, already back to her crossword, already unbothered, already completely herself, is one of the sharpest people I've met in 30 years of practice. I looked at her too. Yeah, I said. I know. I've always known. I left the hospital at 4:25. Harold drove me home. He looked at me the way old friends do, not searching for information, just checking that you're still standing. Everything okay? Yeah, I said quietly. Everything's exactly the way it should be. He nodded. Put it in drive. We headed back toward Ashland Boulevard. My phone sat silent in my pocket. Diane hadn't called once all day. She had no idea. Absolutely no idea. But she would. Friday, February the 13th, 8:09 in the morning. I was at Halloran's garage on Birchwood Street when it started. My truck was finally ready, new alternator. An oil change Danny Halloran threw in because our kids had played soccer together, and a fresh set of wiper blades I hadn't even asked for. I Was at the counter signing the invoice when my phone buzzed. Diane, I let it ring. Not out of strategy, I just didn't have anything to say yet. Nothing that would land the way it needed to. I slid the phone back into my jacket, finished signing, shook Danny's hand, and walked out into the Ohio morning. Sharp, cold. Completely honest, I started the engine, let it warm, sat there watching my breath fog the windshield, and thought about bringing Mom home to Larkspur Lane, getting her settled in her kitchen with her tea and her crossword and her dignity fully intact. That's what today was about. Not Diane, not any of it. My phone buzzed again. Diane? Then a third time. A fourth. A fifth. Something's happening. I pulled out and headed toward Riverside Memorial. I had a mother to bring home. She was ready when I got there. 8:47 a.m. gray coat, small overnight bag packed neatly, Sandra the nurse walking beside her, another nurse pushing the mandatory wheelchair, hospital policy, completely non-negotiable. Mom had already argued and lost. With characteristic grace, she stood up from that wheelchair the second she cleared the automatic doors. I can walk to my son's truck, she announced to no one in particular and everyone within earshot. I had a cardiac event, Sandra laughed. Not a personality removal? She took Mom's hand in both of hers. You take care of yourself, Mrs. Doyle. I always do, baby. Mom squeezed her hand. You're a good one. Don't let anybody tell you different. Sandra pressed her lips together, looked like she was fighting something, then nodded and stepped back, even in a hospital gown, metaphorically speaking. My mother left people better than she found them. I held the passenger door open. She climbed in slowly, carefully, independently, which mattered to her more than any medication, any instruction, any doctor's order. Her independence was the last thing she'd surrender, and we both knew it. I got in. She looked at my phone sitting face up in the cup holder, lighting up every 30 seconds. Diane, 11 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Mom said nothing. Just put on her seatbelt and smiled faintly out the window, like someone who'd made a decision and was completely at peace with it. I got her home to Larkspur Lane first. The white farmhouse with the blue shutters sat quiet and familiar at the end of the block. The house where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd done homework at the kitchen table, where my father had built a life brick by careful brick and left it standing when he went. The oak tree in the front yard had dropped most of its leaves. The porch was swept clean. The welcome mat said home in faded letters that had been there so long neither of us noticed anymore, but I noticed it that day I got her inside. Made her tea, chamomile, steeped exactly 4 minutes. Because she told me once and I never forgot. Checked the thermostat, checked the fridge, went through the new medications from Dr. Whitfield one by one, reading the labels out loud while she listened with her hands wrapped around her mug. Gerald. She was watching me from across the kitchen table. The table where she'd made every birthday cake, helped me with algebra, sat the morning after my father died and held my hand without saying a word, because some things don't need words. Sit down. I sat. She reached across and covered my hand with both of hers. Small hands, warm, the hands that had packed my lunch and buttoned my coat and waved from the bleachers and held mine in the back of Harold's Buick 2 days before. 54 years of showing up? I need you to hear me, she said. What I did, the will. I didn't do it to punish Diane. Her eyes were steady, clear, no anger in them, no bitterness. Just truth, delivered plain and warm and completely unmovable. I did it because it was right. Because your father and I built something together, and it belongs with someone who understands what building something together actually means. She squeezed my hand once. You understand that? I did. I understood it in my bones. And Gerald? Her voice dropped, not softer, more deliberate. I need you to think about your life. Not the money. Not any of this. She gestured at nothing, at everything. About whether you're happy. About whether you're loved the way you deserve to be loved. She looked at me a long moment. Because you have been showing up alone for a very long time, baby. And a man like you, a man who shows up, deserves someone standing next to him when he does. The kitchen was absolutely still. Outside, a car passed slow on Larkspur Lane. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Everything she said was true. Every word. My throat tightened. My eyes burned just slightly at the corners. I didn't look away. Yeah, I said, voice rough and quiet and completely honest. I know, Mom. She nodded once, slow, like that was exactly what she needed to hear. Patted my hand twice, the same way she'd patted my cheek in that hospital room 2 days before, and let go. Good. She picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down. Now, are you going to answer that phone or not? My phone was buzzing on the table between us. Diane, call number 29. I looked at it. Looked at Mom. She raised one eyebrow. I picked it up, turned it face down, let it buzz against the wood until it stopped. Not yet. The corner of her mouth moved just barely. Not yet, she repeated, like she was tasting the patience in it. I'll check on you tonight, I told her. And tomorrow morning and every morning after that? She waved a hand. I know you will. I mean it, Mom. Gerald. She looked at me over her glasses, put back on at some point without my noticing. I know you mean it. You have always meant it. I left Larkspur Lane at 1:10 p.m., drove home to Ashland Boulevard, parked behind Diane's silver Highlander, and sat in my truck a full minute. 31 missed calls. I went inside. Diane was in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch in her work clothes, both hands wrapped around her phone like it was the only solid thing left. She looked up the second I walked in, eyes raw, sleepless. Something in her face had shifted in a way I hadn't seen before. The careful composure she wore like a second skin had cracked, and underneath it was a woman who'd spent the whole day realizing exactly what she'd done. Gerald, I've been calling you all day. I know. I set my keys on the hook by the door. And I thought about Wednesday night, Mom in that hospital bed with monitors on her chest and 4 in her arm. Dr. Whitfield's measured face telling me her body had been warning her. About Diane's lunch and the bread basket getting past while my mother's heart stuttered in the dark. I let that sit in my chest 1 second. Then I looked at my wife. Did you know? Her voice cracked on the last word. About the will. Did you know she was going to? No, Diane, I didn't know. I turned to face her fully. I found out with everyone else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, composed herself. When she spoke again, it was quieter, more controlled, but underneath it, threaded through every word like a wire pulled too tight, was fear. Real fear, the kind that arrives when consequences finally catch up to choices. She cut me out completely. Frank Sorensen's office called to confirm the changes were filed.